Hi, welcome. Welcome to Community Kitchen Teachables, brought to you by Community Kitchen Programs of Calgary. My name is Anna, and I run the program Calgary's Cooking. And today we are going to talk about how to properly measure ingredients for your recipes. Now, you may wonder, why would I be doing a video on this? Well, the main reason is with all the cooking groups I have worked with over the years and all the teaching I've done with cooking and baking with students over the years, the one thing that we did spend a lot of time on was using the right piece of equipment for the right job. So, when you are measuring liquid, so that would be anything from water, syrup, juice, milk, anything like that, you want to make sure you are using a liquid measuring cup. And that's what this is, a liquid measuring cup. When it comes to dry ingredients, everything from dry pasta, flour, sugar, anything like that, you want to use dry measuring cups, which are these things here. Okay. Now, the reason why it's really important to make sure you're using the right measuring device for the job is that your end result could be drastically affected if you don't use the right measure for the actual recipe. So, for example, if you bake a lot, baking is very, very much a science, and there's very little wiggle room to kind of go by the seat of your pants and not follow a recipe or follow the exact measurement. And that includes making sure that you are using a dry measuring cup for the flour and a wet measuring cup for your liquid. Okay. When it comes to actually cooking, savory cooking, you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of not always following everything to an exact T. But at the same time, you do want to make sure that you are using a liquid measuring cup for your liquids and your dry measuring cup for your dry. So when it comes to actually using your dry measuring cup and how to actually put the ingredient in your measuring cup. So I've got here a 1 cup dry measure cup, and I've got in here all-purpose flour. So I'm going to measure 1 cup of all-purpose flour. So all I do is I take my dry measuring cup, and I can either scoop the flour into the measuring cup, or I can take a spoon and spoon it into the measuring cup. Either way is fine. But the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you level this off, because as you can see right now, this is not level, and this is going to throw off your end product. So you want to make sure you level off the dry ingredients. So all I do is just kind of push it over, lightly tap it down with the back of a butter knife, and then I just even it up, just like so. Then this, therefore, right here, I know I've got 1 cup of flour. And again, this becomes really important when you're doing your baking. 1 cup of flour, if the recipe calls for 1 cup of flour, you want to make sure you're doing exactly that, okay? Now, when it comes to sugar, sugar is a little bit easier to measure. So I have a 1/2 cup here, dry measure cup, and I've got my sugar. This is just granulated sugar, white granulated sugar. And all I have to do is scoop it. And again, you can spoon it into your measuring cup if you want. And then this is a little easier because you can just kind of shake it. And if you want, you can always use your butter knife again. You can smooth out the surface. And again, now you have your dry 1/2 cup of white sugar, okay? Now, what you don't want to do, and I'm going to demonstrate it because I have seen this done several times, is taking a wet measuring cup and people will go, okay, I need a cup of flour. So what do? They take their scoop and they're doing this, okay? This is not accurate for your dry. That's why it's really important to make sure that you use the proper tool for the proper job. So if you were to do this for baking, your final baked product is not going to taste very good because you used the wrong measure for the job. okay? Now, when it comes to wet or liquid ingredients, that's where you're going to use your liquid measuring cup. So when you are measuring milk or water or juice or anything like that, you want to make sure that you add your ingredient to it, but you want to get down at eye level and you want to look, okay? And the reason being is that you will have a different perspective from standing up here and looking down over top versus actually getting down and looking at eye level, okay? When it comes to the measuring spoons, again, same idea. So let's say, for example, your recipe calls for a tablespoon of sugar. Here is our tablespoon, and because it is a dry ingredient, we're going to use a measuring spoon for it. And again, sugar is always a little bit easier to measure. Stick it in, even it out. There's your 1 tablespoon of sugar. Same thing with salt. Again, salt you want to make sure you're really careful with because it's very easy to over salt something. So if your recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of salt, you want to again measure it accordingly, just like that, okay? Now another thing to keep an eye out that's a little bit of a tip is how do you measure sticky? So maple syrup, honey, corn syrup, glucose if you're doing candy making, how do you do that without it getting everywhere? There are 2 things that you can do. You can either wet your measuring cup with water and then add your honey or your sticky liquid to it, or you can take a little bit of pan spray, which is this, and you can spray your measuring cup with this and then measure. So then the next question would be, do you use a liquid for it or do you use a dry measure? Well, that comes down to a personal preference. When I am baking, what I will usually do is I will use the dry measuring cup for a lot of it. For things like honey, molasses, corn syrup, I will use the dry, just simply because it's easier to get it out of the measuring cup. If I'm measuring milk, of course I will use the liquid, okay? So the easiest way, again, you can either wet this with water and then put your sticky substance in it, or you can spray it with pan spray. Now, when you spray it with pan spray, when you spray anything with pan spray, you're going to want to take your equipment that you're going to spray and do it over a garbage can. That way, the oil that comes out of the can isn't going to end up on the floor and then you don't slip on it. Okay, so it goes right into the garbage can. So here I've sprayed my 1/2 cup and I'm going to pour corn syrup into it. Just like so. Then it's going to go into my recipe, but in this case I'll just show you so you can see how easy it comes out. If we hadn't have sprayed it, it would have been really hard to get it out of here, okay? So that concludes our video for how to measure your dry ingredients, how to measure your wet ingredients, and why it's really important to make sure you're using the right measuring device for your actual ingredient. And again, it's important to make sure that you're using it so that your recipe in the end will work out the way that you anticipate. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy your day.